Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be zooming out and studying a couple not exactly constitutional pieces of work, but hang in for the ride. As you grab Michael Holler's book, we'll be on page 74, by the way. That'll be part of our reading today. I'd like to thank you for joining us as we take one step further on our journey through the history and foundation of the United States. Why did this nation separate? How was it set up? What do we need to do to keep it going? Join us as we discuss these questions and more. Would you like to be a part of what we're doing? Pray for each other and for us, especially as I'm turning into a pumpkin. Fellowship in your own study, then go forth and make disciples. All right, and I warned Gage that I'll be monologuing for a little bit. I apologize, but we are zooming out. We discussed this last time. This is Benjamin Franklin's address to Congress while they were setting up the Constitution, asking for prayer to be instated. So let me read through it and then we'll get into discussion. Oh, by the way, Gage, game for you. All right, here it is. Okay. I challenge you to count the Bible verses he quotes. All right.
I get my pen out.
Okay. You don't have to know which ones they are, but if you think that's in the Bible, I want you to put a little check mark on that, all right?
Okay, so it's a little,
Yeah.
Challenge. All right.
I'm going to try to be a 70-year-old genius right now. Mr. President, the small progress we have made after 4 or 5 weeks, close attendance and continual reasonings with each other, our different sentiments on almost every question, several of the last producing as many no's as ayes, is, methinks, a melancholy proof of the imperfection of the human understanding. We indeed seem to feel our own want of political wisdom. Some we have been running about in search of it. We have gone back to ancient history for models of government and examined the different forms of those republics, which, having been formed with the seeds of their own dissolution, now no longer exist. And we have viewed modern states all around Europe, but find none of their constitutions suitable to our circumstances. In this situation of this assembly, groping as it were in the dark to find political truth, and scarce able to distinguish it when presented to us, how has it happened, sir, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understandings? In the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for the divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us who were engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor. To that kind providence we owe this happy opportunity of consulting in peace on the means of establishing our future national felicity. And have we now forgotten that powerful friend? I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. We shall be divided by our little partial local interests, our projects will be confounded, and we ourselves shall become a reproach and byword down to future ages. And what is worse, mankind may hereafter, from this unfortunate instance, despair of establishing governments, be human wisdom, and leave it to chance, war, and conquest. I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberations be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business, and that one or more of the clergy of the city be requested to officiate in that service. All right, how'd you do?
I got 5.
I heard there was 11, but I couldn't verify it, so...
That was amazing. Like
Yeah,
honestly, that was really good.
I'll,
Um,
I'll give you my copy at church this Sunday.
okay, it's it's really profound to think about how much time they spent not only drafting the Constitution but deciding how the government was going to run before they even put pen to paper and writing it down. I mean, he said that they looked at ancient history, they looked at current governments,
Hmm.
and it's really fascinating to think about how long America has been a power and how much of an, to put it bluntly, like they founded this country on God's providence,
Hmm.
and that gets so lost in today's world. People don't even know that, and that's the reason we're still around despite all the nonsense that we've gotten ourselves into.
Hmm.
That's the reason. That's I had no idea. So that's really remarkable to hear.
On top of that, Benjamin Franklin is heralded as the most one of two most unreligious figures in the founding fathers, him and Thomas Jefferson. These are his words. They are not unreligious. They are not.
Mm-mm.
Actually, I take that back. They are unreligious, but they are acknowledging of a living, breathing God that takes matters into his own hand and works in the affairs of men. This is not a Sunday and Wednesday evening church service. These are men who are standing up who have seen God's provision in their lives
Mm-mm.
and cannot but take notice.
Yeah, you think about all the times that they prayed during the war, before they declared war, and you think about the things that they must have seen and the faith that that must have built. For somebody like Ben Franklin to give that address,
Hmm.
not a Christian, like you said, not a religious man, but even he couldn't deny the fact that there was a God and he was in control of the world.
Well, and to kind of put a pin on it, modern scholars point to him because when he was 15, he was a deist. And when he was 16, he was not. But they claim that his self-proclaimed deism at 15 was the rest of his life. And when the foundation of America came about, he was in his 60s, 70s, 80s. He was an old man. So this is three lifetimes removed for him from when he claimed deism.
Mm.
So he had a, for lack of a better word, a testimony. He
Yeah,
had a come to Jesus moment.
man, that is remarkable to think about.
Yeah. As I read this, there was another thing that stuck out to me. Um, it's the second part. Are different sentiments on almost every question, several of the last producing as many no's as A's. Is methinks a melancholy proof of the imperfection of human understanding. We indeed seem to feel our own want of political wisdom. Some have been running around in search for it. Is this what I'm looking for? Um, the so to tie this back into the Bible really quick, there are over 40 authors of the Bible. With whoever, it's either 45 or 46, depending on who wrote Hebrews. We don't know for sure. But to get 40 men to agree on something over the millennia is something amazing. And to get so many men reading about the different governments to agree on this Constitution is also amazing. This was not a dictate handed down by a King George Washington. This was not the betters telling the serfs what they should do. These were not conquering heroes. These were politicians struggling with this. And he was right that their own political self interests were actually pulling this apart. They understood the need to form a new government. They understood Great Britain was bad. They understood that anarchy, everybody's covering his own derriere, was worse. So they realized that they had the need to work together as a government, as a federal government. They were having a hard time putting it together. This was all before the Constitution. The last several weeks that we were reading, this was before that happened. Some critics will say that they didn't immediately see the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin, see the light, and they didn't immediately start prayers. That it took a few weeks to turn around, but once they did start having prayers, they also started having forward momentum. This was the big pivots in the temperature of these meetings.
Hmm.
That something new started to stir. So
Yeah, and do they still start like Congress meetings and House meetings and everything with prayer, or is that a bygone thing now?
I honestly don't know. They don't brag about it.
Yeah. Well, it would certainly make sense that if they don't, we're seeing a lot of what we saw before Ben Franklin's speech. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people looking out for themselves, acting in their own best interests, and that seems like a pretty good explanation why.
Yep, tossing their own pork into the omnibus spending bill to put a contemporary spin on things.
Yeah.
And this right before his request. And what is worse, mankind may hereafter, from this unfortunate instance, despair of establishing governments, be human wisdom, and leave it to chance, war, and conquest. Up
Mm.
to this point, governments were made by chance, war, and conquest. Might is right,
Mm-hmm.
period, except for Israel.
Right.
Except that one was also met as right because God is mightier than all. But that's a whole nother issue. But in that, um, they made a constitution that has outlived several governments, conquered several governments. The one of the most beautiful things is that how much America has conquered and has not forced to be conquered territory. You know, um, Japan to this day still stands as its own nation, and we nuked them twice. But they are not a serfdom. They are not a slave state. They are their own. We after the war brush them off and help them stand up again. Um, and it's interesting to note that with Japan surrendering to America, there were three superpowers on their borders: America, China, and Russia. And they surrendered to the superpower that nuked them. That's how bad China was back then and how bad Russia was back then, that they wanted full American control on Japan. The Japanese did,
Mm.
which is interesting. And that's
China
what
was
these
still
guys,
a power back then.
huh?
China was still a power back then.
It wasn't the CCP, but it was its own nation, and it was very powerful. And um, the much deserved hatred of the Japanese by the Chinese left the Japanese terrified of the reprisal if they were put underneath their care.
Mm-hmm.
And communist Russia was also a big no go.
Mm.
Stalin's Russia. So later it became communist China, but that was 15, 20 years after that. In fact, uh, if memory serves, I could be wrong. It was the brutality of the Japanese that helped communism take over China because all the China loving, God fearing men went to fight the Japanese and died. And in the power vacuum, the communists just rode over all the resistance.
Wow.
So,
So
if memory serves,
what was China before it became communist?
um, Imperial China.
Okay, yeah, so like a dynasty still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, my mind goes straight to like the Huns and the that type of dynasty. So I guess that was that type of government was still going on.
There was a movie I watched. I was forced to watch in high school. That was the Last Emperor of China. I forget what it's called, and how the communists were treating the last emperor as they took over. Chinese government. And one of his childhood friends, while they're still children, says, "You're not the emperor. There's a big man who rides around in a car and everybody does what he says." So, yep. All right. So that is a peek into a sliver, the most smallest fraction of a view into what America was like before the Constitution, after the war. So that's kind of why I'm doing this, is we're zooming out a little bit. We don't always understand why they wrote these things, so we need to zoom out and see what things were like. And then here's why they wrote these things. The Declaration of Independence is a great example of why they wrote these things. When you see what Great Britain had done, but now they had won the war, what was their mindset was. It wasn't a 3 month aha moment and then everybody changed and were locked arms and singing kumbaya and dancing around happily on the golden road. It took work, it took mind changing, and it took growth, and this is the smallest fraction of a glimmer of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because one thing that I tend to do when I look back at history, especially when I read the Bible, like it's hard for me to picture these people as more than just flat characters on a page. Like these people, these were people. They had lives. So I think this was a really good idea, and I definitely appreciate it. A little bit
Yep.
of gloves, he said.
All right, and if you'll go ahead and read the preamble to the Bill of Rights.
You got it. All right. Congress of the United States begun and held at the city of New York on Wednesday, the 4th of March, 1789. The conventions of a number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent beneficent
But
beneficent ends
yeah, you
of
had
it,
it right the second time.
beneficent ends of its institution. Resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America, in Congress assembled, two-thirds of both houses concurring, that the following articles be proposed to the legislatures of the several states as amendments to the Constitution of the United States, all or any of which articles, when ratified by three-fourths of the said legislatures, to be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution. These articles, in addition to an amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America proposed by Congress and ratified by the legislatures of the several states, pursuant to the fifth article of the original Constitution. Note stop there.
Okay. So with this preamble, we got the why the first 10 amendments were written. Um, this goes back to what I was saying. There's 5 powers in the United States Constitution. And the most powerful setting is the individual. The second is the state. The third is the Congress. The fourth most powerful is the executive. And the fifth is the judicial. And they were worried that in the setting up of the Constitution of the federal government, it did not protect the individual. And so these first 10 amendments are to tell the federal government, no, this is not yours. Leave it alone. So these are the establishment of the rights of the individual.
Now, is that just the first 10 amendments, or do all the amendments after that add to the rights of the individual?
The first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights because they're specifically for the individual. 11 and on are amendments, like we saw back in Article 2, changing parts of the Constitution.
Okay. Yeah,
So these, like it says in the preamble, these were established to make darn sure that the federal government understood it had limits. There's some things it just couldn't do. We read back last time about how there could not be a religious test for holding office.
Yeah.
There was a concern that if, say, a mainly Baptist or even mainly Anabaptist Congress got put in place, they could actually vote in a test to make sure everybody coming in was an Anabaptist or a Baptist or a Pentecostal, or I don't know if they had Pentecostals back then, I'm sorry, or Episcopalian or one of those different denominations. It wasn't just, is Jesus the Son of God? It wasn't that simple. It was actually prescribed and a religious test like, are you part of our religion
Mm.
and this denomination? They didn't have the term, I don't believe they had the term denominations back then. But this is the other way, as we'll see in the amendments, that they were protecting the rights of the individual.
Mhm. Yeah, it's fascinating. The Constitution in its entirety is meant to, I don't want to say restrict the government, but like to put reins on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gets lost in today's world. Um, I think it's almost begun to warp, at least people's perception of it,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is scary, right?
Right. Well, and it's kind of interesting. I saw a video today where an actor asks, as part of a TV show, what right do the police have to take my gun? The police have no rights. They have responsibilities. The individual has rights. The individual police officer, the person himself, has the rights. But whenever anybody actually executes a law, they have to point back to the Constitution or a law thereof that is constitutional.
Hmm.
So it like you say, though, the whole thing gets mixed up. Like the federal government has rights. No, it doesn't. It has responsibilities. The state
Mm.
government does not have. Okay, I take that back. Hold on. Let me rephrase that better. The states individually have rights, and that was one of the major things about the Civil War was state rights. The state's right to own slaves, which was dumb. But it was that war of powers between the states' autonomy and the federal government's control. And the federal government under Lincoln saw that the rights of the individual outweighed the rights of the states.
Okay.
Going back to that.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that caused a stir. People thought, so your rights cannot infringe on somebody else's rights. Isn't that in here somewhere?
Um, we have seen that. A few different examples of that in here, like the federal government cannot prefer one state over another, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, I think we will see in the Bill of Rights. Well, my personal belief that every right comes with a greater, if not equal, responsibility.
Hmm.
Jesus Christ says, "Love the Lord your God with thy heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." And whatever rights you have to love your neighbor as yourself, you must protect those rights in your neighbor. Um, I've seen Ben Shapiro say, I have the right to swing my arms around as much as I want. I don't have the right for one of them to swing into your face.
Hmm.
Because as I have the right to bodily autonomy, so do you. Going back to the Declaration of Independence, it says, among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We could sit down and we can write out all the rights that we're supposed to have, and it can just take, we can micromanage everything, but just understanding that they are yours and should not be infringed on by others unless you infringe on another's.
Hmm. So one of my misconceptions coming into this study was that the Constitution contained the laws of the United States. So, but it's clear that that's not the case. We do have a physical book of laws, federal laws.
Mm-hmm.
What's that called? Do you know?
Got me. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. Um, there is the Constitution, which is framework for how laws are passed. There is, like I referred to earlier, the omnibus, the spending bills. It
Hmm.
is the job of Congress to spend money of the taxes to keep the government running. Um, there are there were times that in order to quote unquote protect the Constitution, other laws were written. Um, Declarations of war come through the Congress. So things that come out of Congress are not always laws. There are also treaties. There are also declarations of war. There are also spending measures. Um, there is the voting on like establishing federal departments of which the executive is supposed to keep watch on. And then the Congress is also supposed to provide oversight on to make sure the executive is doing their job. As you've seen that the current president, it's actually quite interesting because all any president has to do to help return America back to its path is start following the law as written. Um, some things, here's a law for you: the Doge. That was an executive order, and people were mad because the Doge was investigating the FBI. The FBI was a much smaller executive order. It was not from Congress. So literally, Doge can check out the FBI, or President Trump could sign an executive order that's basically called the Bye Bye FBI,
Mm.
signed Donald Trump, and that just closes down the FBI right then, right there, because it is not a congressional law, mandate, or statutes.
Hmm.
It is a department put up by an executive in the past. I don't know which presidents right now to help fulfill the law.
That's fascinating. There's just the more you learn about this stuff, the more you realize you know absolutely nothing, and that's
Yeah.
it's a really cool concept. But um, it's a good thing you're here because I don't know anything about any of this stuff.
I don't know that much either. I'm just like, all right, let's talk about departments. I think the FDA came out from a law of Congress. So Donald Trump cannot shut down the FDA, but he still has oversight and executive authority over the FDA to tell them where to go and what to do.
Hmm.
Same with the education department. I believe that that is also a congressional department, but he can tell them where to go. He appoints its leaders and he tells them what to do. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, there's some he can just write out of existence, like he did with USAID. He can just say, you know what, this is a bad idea. It's now this. It's gone. Executive, sign the name. I'm just auto penning over here.
Wait,
Uh,
like you did with what?
I'm just auto penning.
No, no, no. Like Trump did with what? He signed it out of existence.
USAID, yeah.
U.S. aid.
So USAID, United States Agency of International Development, I believe, which was a slush fund that was very wink, wink, nudge, nudge,
Mm.
and got audited. And then after being drastically downsized, the few employees that had left got put in the State Department because there were times that the State Department and USAID would work like that instead of working together.
Mm.
So,
Okay, so it's still, yeah. I guess it's not its own entity anymore, but it still exists in a way.
yeah, all three employees are still there, are still a member of USAID, but it's just being overseen by the US State Department.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't know, once again, if there are three employees left. There might only be two. I don't know. So,
Too many probably.
depends on if they're working with the State Department to get stuff done properly.
Mm.
So, once again, all he really has to do to really screw up a lot of people's plans is just enforce the law as it's written.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of people off. Um, this is where things like Obamacare, which is a law, was passed. Where Obamacare, which is now a law, was technically passed because of backroom dealings. I just can't say it was actually passed and just let that lie. No, it wasn't actually passed. Oh my goodness. I do not have the bandwidth to explain exactly how Obamacare is a law right now. It is a law. It is garbage. And it was not, House of Representatives never voted on it. Let's just call it that. But somehow it is still a law of the land that was passed from Congress.
I thought Trump repealed that.
If he did, good riddance. I would like that to be the case. I
Hmm.
hope you're right. I'm not sure. But that's
I
okay.
have absolutely no idea. I feel like I heard that at some point, but they're always talking about it. So
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that piece of legislation is very politicized, very garbage. Took over a sixth of the U.S. economy and did not make it better. Saw a guy on the internet this morning, and he talked about how Trump could federalize Washington, D.C. That's inside of his authority. And he's looking forward to it as it might be the only one of the few times that government gets involved in something and it actually comes out better.
what do you mean by federalize? Like make it its own country?
Well, as we read back in the Constitution, um, Washington, D.C. is the 10 square acres, the 10 acres of land that was given by Maryland to the federal government to have all of its offices on. Somehow residences got put on there, and more residents and people started living there, which has caused a lot of problems because they don't have a senator or representative,
Mm.
and somehow they got a electoral college person or two, but they are under the federal government when it comes to enforcement, law enforcement, and governance. There is no, how do I put it? There's no Virgin, Maryland does not step in across county lines to help with things there. It is Washington, D.C.'s problem.
Mm.
So when Donald Trump federalizes it, he just says, we're in the federal government. This is federal land. We're coming in to take our authority.
Mm. So then kick everybody out.
Huh?
So he'd kick everybody out.
He could. He could override everybody. He is choosing to work with people.
Mm.
So,
And what are the like the benefits of doing that? I don't quite understand.
um, the biggest reason that he did it is because,
No, like what would be the benefits of federalizing DC?
oh, federalizing? Well, it already is federalized
Okay.
because it comes underneath the jurisdiction of the federal government, not Maryland. So,
Okay. Okay. So the president doesn't have to allow people to live in Washington D.C. I mean, technically, nobody should live there, right?
technically,
Yeah. Okay. So then, what are the benefits of working with the people that live there? I mean,
law enforcement mainly, cleaning up the streets. That's about it. Um, having the nation's capital be safe to walk through.
yeah.
I've wanted to visit the Smithsonian except for in the last decade and a half. I've been not too keen on visiting the nation's capital, but maybe in a couple of years it might be cleaned up enough to go pay it a visit.
The DC trip is, I believe, that's standard for public schools in Florida. We went in eighth grade, and
Really?
yeah, we stayed like 2 nights and saw all the memorials, the National Mall, the Smithsonian, all that stuff. It was quite a trip. We actually really enjoyed it.
I give you my congratulations for going. I give you my condolences that it was only a couple of days.
Yeah, and I wish I could have been older to actually appreciate it. I was in eighth grade, so I didn't even know what I was looking at.
And a couple of years, let's head back up. How's that sound?
That sounds great to me. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. So let's close this up. Any final thoughts?
Um, no, I think I said everything that came to my mind, so I think I'm good.
Yeah. And I'll go ahead and close this out in prayer today.
Okay.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for these men who built such an amazing structure that it still stands to this day and planted a tree that we still enjoy the fruits from. Lord God, I want this for my children. I want to send it forward. I understand that we must stand tall and strong and resist those who want to come and destroy it. I don't know fully how I can do that yet, Lord, but please help me to do my part to keep this strong for my children. In your name, amen.